I owe Dave Crenshaw a bit of a favour. In his book, The Myth of Multitasking, Dave Crenshaw gets you to do this classic task which I have, thanks to him, repeated many times and got the same result. See if you can grab a pen and a piece of paper. What he asks you to do is to write down the phrase, multitasking is a myth. But what you've got to do is, in between writing the first letter, M, you've got to also then write the number 1. And when you write U, you then need to write the number 2. So you've got to do something like this, and you've got to time how long it takes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, M-U-L-T-I, 5, T, 6, etc., right throughout the whole phrase. And of course, you could see what was starting to happen for me. After you get to about the 5th or the 6th letter, what starts to happen is I have to go back and start again in my brain to go M-U-T-L-I, M-U-T-L-I-T. You have to do that sort of thing. Then he asks you to write down how long that took you, and then he asks you to compare it by just writing the phrase, multitasking is a myth, and then writing the numbers 1 to 19. And of course, second time around, it takes about half the time, which goes to prove his point. The phrase multitasking comes from the computer industry, where what's actually happening in the computers is they're not multitasking. What they're doing is they are allocating memory to a particular task, but their switch tasking is probably really what they're doing. So they allocate memory to this task, allocate memory to this task, allocate memory to this task, allocate memory back to this task, to this task, to this. That's what they're doing. This is, of course, the same thing that happens with us when we're trying to multitask. We're not really multitasking, we're just switch tasking. And when we go back to the first task, what is happening, Dave Crenshaw argues, quite convincingly, is that we are doing the equivalent of, in our mind, jumping back to the beginning and trying to retrace our steps to work out where we're at. It's ineffective. It causes errors, it reduces our ability to concentrate. Now, some people might be sitting out there thinking to themselves, oh Rod, this is a male-female thing, isn't it? You know, guys just can't ride 2 horses at once. My mum used to say this to me as she was reading her book, doing her knitting and watching the television. And she'd look across at me and she'd say, see Rod, see, multitasking, knitting, watching telly, reading book, all at the same time, no problems. But then, of course, what would happen is halfway into the program, my mum would turn to me and she'd say, why is he talking to him? I thought they were on opposite sides. No, Mum, do you remember just before the previous ad break, there was a scene that made it fairly evident that he's a double agent, that... Okay? And then, of course, a couple of minutes later, Mum's pulling apart her knitting. You know, she's undoing all this good work that she's done. I'd say to her, Mum, what's going on? And she'd say, oh, I forgot to knit 1 purl 2 a couple of rows ago. So goodness knows what's happening with the book. In an age where there is endless noise from marketing and advertising, from electronic gadgets, from phones, from social media, Dave Crenshaw very succinctly puts the case that multitasking is a myth and that doing it all gets nothing done.